everyone, welcome back to Audrey Kramer Coaching. I am so excited to have you guys all here. Last week we talked a little bit about emotional intelligence and what it is and why it's so important. And we kind of went into the 4 different categories of areas that you can look into, areas that you can grow into, so on and so forth. Now, there's a bunch of different models of emotional intelligence. There's kind of 3 main ones from what I recall. This one is most adapted from Doctors Bradbury and Greaves in their book, Emotional Intelligence 2.0. It's a really great read. I'm reading some other books as well, so if you get a chance to do that, definitely check them out. So the topic I wanted to talk about today is that first component of emotional intelligence, which is self-awareness. Now, this can be really hard or it can be really easy. So the main idea behind self-awareness is, what am I feeling and why am I feeling this way? So if you remember last week, we kind of talked about all of these different stimuli come in and your brain sends it up. It goes through your limbic system and there's an emotional response to that. So your emotional response is serving some kind of purpose. It is addressing a need. It is addressing a value. It is addressing your sense of self. And so some of those things can be kind of triggering or threatening. So sometimes we get really worked up about stuff. So in order to really focus on self-awareness, we need to be able to see the whole picture. And sometimes this is really hard, right? I've done a lot of study in acceptance and commitment therapy. And one of the ideas that it talks about is just mindfulness and having that acceptance piece, right? Because if I'm anxious about something and then I think about it and then I get anxious about being anxious, now I have anxiety about my anxiety. And a lot of times we'll label our emotions in a way that makes them good or bad. And we want to try to step away from that so that we can get a clear picture of everything that's going on. That's the only way really that you're going to be able to grow fully into that space and have that whole beautiful tableau of who you are as a person. Because if I only look at the good parts of me and I don't ever look at the bad parts and I just shut them out and go, la, 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 I don't want to talk about it, I'm never going to get any better. So I need to be willing to look at that complete picture as a whole. And it's much, much easier to do that when I can take away this feeling is good or this feeling is bad. So taking that step back is really, really helpful. Now, this is much, much easier accomplished when we can be curious about something. So have the ability to ask questions about things like, oh, okay, well, I'm feeling a little frustrated right now. What just happened in my external environment? How am I feeling internally about this? And kind of create that space so that when your limbic system comes up with that emotion, there's a little bit of cushion before you get to the action part of it, right? Because we don't want to react to something and just be really emotionally attached to it. We want to respond to something. So we're taking our emotions and we're putting them into consideration before we make a choice about what's going to happen next. So be curious about what you're feeling and what it was that got you there. Is it a particular tendency you have? Is it a particular trigger that you have that when somebody does something a certain way, it just sets you off? Or, oh, I know they did that just to make me mad. Like those types of things that come up. And we see this, I'm going to bring up social media again. We see this so often in social media that as you're scrolling through Facebook, mostly Facebook, as you're scrolling through and you're seeing these posts, especially in the political season and things like that, it's really easy to get riled up and get frustrated and go, oh my God, that's not true. Or I need to correct this person. There's somebody wrong on the internet. It's like my favorite thing, right? But if we can kind of step out of that and recognize that, hey, if I'm having a really strong emotional response to something, that's probably a signal to me that I need to take a step back and put myself in a more neutral space and analyze where all of this is coming from instead of just jumping on the bandwagon. Because I can't tell you how many countless times I've had an emotional response to something and I just react just on gut, pure instinct of how I'm feeling, and then find out 20, 30 minutes later that like, oh, that's not what's really going on. I didn't have the whole picture of things. So it's really nice to kind of have that cushion in between. Couple of things that will be really helpful for this actually are some of the exercises we did in the previous weeks, right? So if you're able to check in and do a body scan, if you have a really strong emotion that comes up, just sit with it for a minute and feel how it feels in your body and where it's showing up in your body. You can also try the leaves on a stream exercise to kind of take that label of good or bad out, that you're just taking these emotions and you're saying, oh, that looks like this. And then don't say anything else about it. Let it go by and just continue to engage with your emotions in that way as like a recognition piece and not as a label piece, which is super helpful. This last one is the hard part. Get feedback. And this is critical because we're only seeing ourselves from our lens, that I'm in my space every day and I hear everything that goes on in my brain, but I don't oftentimes get outside feedback. I'm sure my partner will forgive me for telling this story, but I asked him the other day about different habits that I have that maybe I'm not aware of. And I like things a very particular way, and I'm not afraid to say it. I'm at a point in my life where, hey, these are my expectations in a relationship. So I'm going to talk about something if it's frustrating me. And I noticed that he started saying, I love you a lot more. And the whole reason he was saying that was because he didn't feel safe saying something else, because he felt like I was going to jump down his throat and like correct him or tell him he needs to be better or something else. So I felt awful, right? Like, oh, I want him to be safe to tell me all of the things and not just I love you, because that feels like the safe thing to say. So I've been doing a lot of work on just kind of recognizing my own reactions to things that happen in our household and how do I respond to that and how do I see it from a more holistic, like overall perspective and not just my own little bubble. And that's sometimes really hard, right? Because we have to really deeply look at ourselves and go, oh, this is a good thing, or oh, this is not a good thing. But again, just kind of take that label off, approach it with a healthy sense of curiosity and a growth mindset, right? Just be willing to grow and change and look at yourself from that perspective. So this is definitely a big topic that we could go on forever, but those are just some of my quick tips to kind of help you. And next week, we will talk a little bit more about that self-management piece. So once you're able to observe those emotions and recognize them and be aware of them for what they are and what purpose they're serving, then what do you do with that? What are you going to do in response to those emotions? So we will talk about that next week. I'm so excited, and we'll see you then.